When the woman on the other end of my husband's phone said, "Who is this? Why are you calling my husband's number?" I felt my entire world collapse. Because the phone in my hand belonged to Michael, my husband of 26 years, and I had no idea who this woman was. Her voice was sharp, protective, confused. She spoke with the authority of someone who had every right to answer his phone. But so did I. I was his wife. At least, I thought I was. My name is Rebecca Walsh. I'm 51 years old, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. 3 years ago, I discovered that my husband wasn't just cheating on me. He was living an entirely different life, with a different family, in a different city. A life where I didn't exist, where our children didn't exist, where 26 years of marriage, of building a home together, of trusting him completely, meant absolutely nothing. He had erased us, created a whole other world, and he had been doing it for over a decade. This is the story of how I caught him. But more than that, it's the story of how I survived what came after, because the truth was so much worse than I ever could have imagined. There were bank accounts I knew nothing about, children I had never met, lies so elaborate, so carefully constructed, that even now I wonder how one person could maintain it all. And here's what terrifies me most. If I hadn't pretended to go on that trip, if I hadn't faked leaving town just to see what he would do, I might still be living in that lie today. Stay with me until the end, because what I found will show you that the person sleeping next to you every night might be a complete stranger. Before we dive deeper, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because if you don't subscribe, you might miss the most important story that could save you from the same nightmare I lived through. The story that could help you see the signs I ignored for years. Don't let that happen. Subscribe now. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when life made sense. I was born Rebecca Ann Patterson in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1972. My father owned a small construction company that specialized in residential homes throughout Mecklenburg County. My mother was a kindergarten teacher at Providence Elementary for 32 years. I grew up in a modest ranch-style house in the Plaza Midwood neighborhood, back when it was still considered the quiet part of town. I was the middle child of 3. My older brother Daniel became an accountant. My younger sister Jennifer became a speech therapist. We were an ordinary American family. We went to church on Sundays at Central Church of God. We had backyard barbecues in the summer. My dad taught me how to change a tire when I was 16. My mom taught me how to make her famous pecan pie from scratch. I graduated from Myers Park High School in 1990, then went straight to Central Piedmont Community College to study nursing. I became a registered nurse in 1993, right out of nursing school, and I got my first job at Carolina's Medical Center in the cardiac care unit. 3 years later, I transferred to the maternity ward, and that's where I stayed for the next 28 years. I brought thousands of babies into this world. I held the hands of terrified first-time mothers. I reassured fathers who looked like they might pass out in the delivery room. That's what I did. I helped people during the most vulnerable, beautiful moments of their lives. I cared for people. I trusted people. I believed in the goodness of people. I met Michael David Walsh in the summer of 1996 at a 4th of July cookout hosted by my cousin Amanda. He was 28 years old, I was 24. He had recently moved to Charlotte from Raleigh to take a position as a regional sales representative for Piedmont Medical Supply, a company that sold pharmaceutical products and medical equipment to hospitals and clinics throughout the Carolinas and Georgia. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark brown hair and these incredibly kind hazel eyes that seemed to light up when he smiled. He had this easy confidence about him, the kind that comes from someone who's comfortable talking to strangers, which made sense given his job in sales. When Amanda introduced us, he shook my hand and said he'd heard I was a nurse. And he immediately started asking me thoughtful questions about my work, about what equipment we used in the hospital, about what could be improved. He wasn't trying to sell me anything. He genuinely seemed interested. We talked for 2 hours that night, sitting on the back porch while fireworks exploded over the lake. He told me about growing up in Raleigh, about playing baseball in high school, about how his father had died of a heart attack when Michael was only 19, and how that had made him want to work in healthcare, even if it was just on the business side. He made me laugh. He listened when I talked. He remembered details. When he asked for my phone number at the end of the night, I didn't hesitate to give it to him. We went on our first official date 3 days later. He took me to an Italian restaurant in Dilworth, and afterward, we walked around Freedom Park until almost midnight, just talking about everything and nothing. We dated for 11 months before he proposed. He took me back to that same lake where we'd met, got down on one knee at sunset, and asked me to marry him with a modest diamond ring he'd saved up for months to buy. I said yes without a second of hesitation. We got married on June 14th, 1997, at Central Church of God with about 120 guests in attendance. My father walked me down the aisle. My sister Jennifer was my maid of honor. Michael's best friend from college, a guy named Stephen Parker, was his best man. We had our reception at the church fellowship hall. Nothing fancy or extravagant, but it was perfect. It was us. We honeymooned in Myrtle Beach for 4 days because that's all the time I could get off work. We bought our first house together in November of 1997. A small 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in the Hickory Grove area of Charlotte. The mortgage was $940 a month, which felt like a fortune to us back then, but we made it work. I worked the day shift at the hospital. Michael worked his sales territory, which required him to travel throughout North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, visiting hospitals, meeting with purchasing departments, demonstrating new medical devices and pharmaceutical products. He was good at his job, really good. Within 2 years, he'd become one of the top performers in his region, which meant better commissions, which meant we could start thinking about starting a family. Our daughter Hannah was born in March of 2000. I'll never forget the moment Michael held her for the first time. He cried. This strong, confident man just broke down in tears, looking at our baby girl. 2 years later, in May of 2002, our son Ethan came along, and our family felt complete. Those early years of raising babies while working full-time were exhausting, but they were good years. Michael was a hands-on father when he was home. He changed diapers, did midnight feedings, read bedtime stories. When Hannah started kindergarten, he never missed a school play or parent-teacher conference if he was in town. When Ethan got into t-ball, Michael volunteered as an assistant coach for 3 seasons. We hosted Thanksgiving every year. We went to the Outer Banks every summer for a week-long beach vacation. We attended Central Church of God every Sunday when Michael wasn't traveling for work. We had a normal, stable, predictable life. The next 15 years followed a comfortable pattern. Michael's career continued to advance. By 2008, he'd been promoted to senior regional manager, which meant even more travel, but it also meant a significant salary increase that allowed us to move to a bigger house in the Ballantyne area in 2010, a beautiful 4-bedroom home with a 2-car garage and a backyard big enough for the kids to play in. The mortgage was $2,200 a month, but Michael assured me we could afford it, and we could. His commission checks were substantial. I continued working at the hospital, eventually becoming a charge nurse in the maternity ward. Hannah grew into a bright, athletic teenager who played varsity soccer and made honor roll every semester. Ethan was quieter, more introspective, but he excelled in math and science and spent hours building intricate Lego structures in his room. Michael traveled more and more as the years went on. Sometimes he'd be gone Monday through Thursday. Sometimes he'd leave on Sunday night and not come back until Friday evening. His territory had expanded to include parts of Tennessee and Alabama, which meant longer trips, more overnight stays in hotels. But that was normal for us. That's how he provided for our family. That's how we paid for the house, the cars, the kids' activities, the college savings accounts. When he was home on weekends, we made the most of it. We'd go out to dinner at Brio or Cheesecake Factory. We'd watch movies together as a family. We'd attend Hannah's soccer games and Ethan's academic competitions. We weren't passionately in love anymore like we'd been in our 20s, but we were partners. We were a team. We respected each other. We trusted each other. Or at least, I trusted him completely. Looking back now, I can see how naive that was, how blind I was. But when you've built an entire life with someone, when you've raised children together, when you've shared a bed for over 2 decades, you don't want to believe they're capable of betrayal. You don't want to see the signs because seeing them would mean your entire reality is a lie. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. Or maybe I saw them and just chose to believe his explanations because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. Because when you've been with someone for 25 years, when you've built a whole life together, when your children call him daddy and your friends consider you the stable couple, you don't want to believe they're capable of something so devastating. You convince yourself that the small inconsistencies are nothing, that the strange phone calls are work-related, that the unexplained charges on credit card statements are business expenses, that the distant look in his eyes sometimes when he comes home from a trip is just exhaustion. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, doesn't it? It starts small, a tiny crack in the foundation that you can easily ignore. Then, another crack appears, and another, until one day you realize the entire structure is unstable, and it has been for years. You just refuse to see it. In my case, that first crack appeared in September of 2020. I was 48 years old. Michael was 52. We'd been married for 23 years. And it started with something so small, so seemingly insignificant, that I almost dismissed it entirely. It started the morning Michael left his phone on the kitchen counter. It was September 15th, 2020, a Tuesday morning. I remember the date exactly because it was the day everything started to unravel, even though I didn't know it yet. Michael had left for work at 6:30 that morning, heading to what he said was a 3-day sales trip covering hospitals in Columbia, South Carolina, and Augusta, Georgia. He kissed me goodbye like he always did, grabbed his overnight bag, and walked out the door. 30 minutes later, I was in the kitchen making myself a cup of coffee before my shift at the hospital when I heard his phone buzzing on the counter. He'd forgotten it. Michael never forgot his phone. In all the years I'd known him, he was practically attached to that device. It was his lifeline for work, his calendar, his contact list, everything. I picked it up, intending to call him on his work cell to let him know he'd left it behind, figuring he'd probably already realized and was turning around to come get it. But then I saw the caller ID. It said Atlanta office, which made sense given his company had a regional office there. I assumed it was someone from work trying to reach him about the trip, maybe his manager or a colleague. So I answered it. I said hello, and the voice that came through the speaker was a woman's voice, casual and familiar, saying, "Hey babe, I'm at the grocery store. Do you want me to grab that beer you like? The one from that brewery you showed me?" Babe. She called him babe. For a second, I couldn't process it. I stood there frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Then I managed to speak. I said, hello? Who is this?" There was a pause on the other end. A long, confused pause. Then the woman said, "Who is this? Why are you answering Michael's phone?" Her tone had completely changed. The casual warmth was gone, replaced by something sharp and defensive. And that's when I said the words that would change everything. I said, "This is his wife. Who are you?" Another pause. This one even longer. I could hear background noise on her end, shopping cart wheels, the beep of a scanner, the murmur of other shoppers. She was definitely at a grocery store, just like she'd said. And then, without another word, she hung up, just like that. Click. The call ended. I stood there in my kitchen, still holding Michael's phone, my hands starting to shake. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked at the screen, at the call log, and I saw that this Atlanta office number had called Michael 63 times in the past month. 63 times. I scrolled through his recent calls and saw the same number appearing over and over again. Some calls lasted 2 minutes. Some lasted 45 minutes. There were calls at 9 in the morning, calls at 11 at night, calls on weekends. This wasn't a work colleague. Work colleagues don't call you at 11 at night. They don't call you babe. They don't ask about your favorite beer. When Michael came home 2 days later, Thursday evening, I was waiting for him. I'd spent those 2 days barely sleeping, barely eating, my mind going in circles trying to make sense of what had happened. I'd looked at that phone 100 times, scrolling through the call logs, trying to find text messages, but discovering that his messaging app required a passcode I didn't know. When he walked through the door, I was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone in front of me. He saw it immediately. I watched his face, looking for guilt, for panic, for something. But he just smiled, looking relieved. "Oh, thank God," he said. "I've been going crazy without that thing. Where was it?" I told him it had been on the kitchen counter. Then I told him about the call. I watched his reaction carefully. He looked confused for a moment, then he actually laughed. He said it must have been a wrong number, someone trying to call a different Michael, maybe someone from the Atlanta office with a similar name. He said, "These things happen all the time at big companies. People misdial, people confuse contacts." He said it was probably some guy's girlfriend trying to reach him and accidentally calling Michael's number instead. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. So I asked him why the Atlanta office number had called him 63 times in the past month. He didn't miss a beat. He said that was the main switchboard number for the regional office, and that when anyone from that office called him, it showed up as Atlanta office on the caller ID because that's how their phone system worked. He said it could have been any of the 20 people who worked there. It made sense. Kind of. Enough sense that I wanted to accept it. Because the alternative, the thing I didn't want to think about, was too horrible. So I let it go. I handed him his phone, and I let it go. 4 months later, in January of 2021, I was organizing our financial documents to prepare for tax season. I've always been the one who handled our taxes. Michael made the money, but I managed it, paid the bills, balanced the checkbooks, tracked our expenses. I was sitting at the desk in our home office, going through statements from our various accounts, our checking account, our savings account, our 2 credit cards that we used for everyday expenses and travel. That's when I found a statement I'd never seen before. It was mixed in with the mail, addressed to Michael David Walsh from American Express. But we didn't have an American Express card. At least, I didn't think we did. Our credit cards were through Chase and Bank of America. I opened the envelope, thinking maybe it was some kind of promotional offer or a mistake. But it wasn't. It was a legitimate statement for an American Express card in Michael's name, with an account number I didn't recognize. And there were charges on it. A lot of charges. I sat there reading through them, my confusion growing with each line. Target in Atlanta, Georgia, $347. Pottery Barn Kids in Atlanta, Georgia, $892. Whole Foods in Atlanta, $163. Shell Gas Station in Atlanta, $54. And then, one that made my blood run cold. Piedmont Pediatrics in Buckhead, $150 copay. A pediatrician. Our kids were 20 and 18 years old. Hannah was a sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill. Ethan was a senior in high school, about to turn 18. We hadn't been to a pediatrician in years. Why would Michael be paying a copay at a pediatric clinic? I looked at the date of the charge. November 12th, 2020. A Thursday. I pulled out my calendar and checked. Michael had been on a work trip that week. Atlanta, he'd said. 3 days of meetings with hospital administrators. I kept reading through the statement. There were more charges from Atlanta. Restaurants I'd never heard of. A charge from Bye Bye Baby for $234. A charge from Carter's Children's Clothing Store for $117. Children's clothing. I sat there, staring at these charges, trying to make them make sense in a way that didn't involve what I was starting to suspect. When Michael got home that evening, I showed him the statement. I asked him about it as calmly as I could manage. I said I'd found this credit card statement, and I didn't know we had this account, and could he explain these charges? I watched his face carefully. He looked at the statement, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw something flash in his eyes. Was it panic? Was it calculation? But then it was gone, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. He sighed and said he'd been meaning to tell me about that card. He said his company had gotten him a corporate American Express for business expenses, client gifts, things like that. He said the charges I was looking at were all work-related. The Target purchase was gift baskets for clients. The Pottery Barn Kids order was a baby gift for his regional manager whose daughter had just had a baby. The children's clothing was another client gift. And the pediatrician? He said that was him helping out a coworker whose insurance had lapsed and who couldn't afford the copay for his sick kid, so Michael had paid it and the guy was going to pay him back. It all sounded plausible, reasonable even. But then he said something that made me feel terrible. He said he was disappointed that I was going through his mail, that I was questioning his expenses, that after 23 years of marriage, I should trust him. He said he worked hard to provide for our family, and he didn't appreciate being interrogated like he was some kind of criminal. And just like that, I was the one apologizing. I was the one feeling guilty for snooping, for being suspicious, for not trusting my husband. He accepted my apology graciously, gave me a hug, and told me he loved me, and I let it go. Again. But this time, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that something wasn't right. I ignored that voice. I pushed it down, because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging that my entire life might be built on lies. March 23rd, 2021, my 49th birthday. Michael had promised me weeks in advance that he would be home for it. He'd even made reservations at my favorite restaurant, a French bistro in South End that we'd been to on our anniversary a few years earlier. He'd told his manager he was taking the day off. No travel. No meetings. Just us. I was looking forward to it more than I wanted to admit. The truth is, we hadn't been spending much time together lately. His travel schedule had gotten even more demanding over the past year. He was gone more than he was home. When he was home, he seemed distracted, always on his phone, always tired. I missed him. I missed us. So when he promised to be there for my birthday, it felt significant. Like maybe we could reconnect. Like maybe things could go back to how they used to be. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to find Michael already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with his phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in a low voice, and when he saw I was awake, he got up and walked out of the room, closing the door behind him. I lay there listening to the muffled sound of his voice from the hallway. 5 minutes later, he came back in. He sat down on the bed next to me and took my hand, and he said the words I'd been dreading. There was an emergency. A major client in Greenville, South Carolina, was threatening to switch to a competitor, and Michael's boss needed him to drive up there immediately to save the account. It was a crisis. It couldn't wait. He was so sorry. He felt terrible, but he had to go. I asked him if there was anyone else who could handle it. He said no. He was the senior regional manager. This was his responsibility. I asked him how long he'd be gone. He said just overnight. He'd be back tomorrow, Friday, and we could celebrate then. A day late, but we'd make it special. I tried to hide my disappointment. I told him I understood. Work is work. These things happen. He kissed me, wished me happy birthday, and left. Hannah called me from Chapel Hill to wish me happy birthday. Ethan, who still lived at home, made me pancakes for breakfast before he left for school. My sister called, my mother called, friends texted. But all day, I felt this hollow ache in my chest. My husband wasn't there. On my 49th birthday, he'd chosen work over me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how Michael had looked that morning when he told me he had to leave. There was something in his expression that I couldn't quite identify. Relief? Was he relieved to have an excuse to go? At 2 a.m, I was still wide awake, staring at the ceiling, when I did something I'd never done before. I got out of bed, went to the home office, and logged into our cell phone account online. Our carrier had a feature where the primary account holder could view call and text message logs for all the phones on the plan. I'd never used it before. I'd never had a reason to. But that night, I pulled up Michael's phone records. What I found made my hands start shaking. There were text messages. Hundreds of them, to and from that same number that had called him back in September. The number that had shown up as Atlanta office on his phone. I started reading. The messages went back months. Years maybe, but the online system only showed the last 6 months. And what I read made my stomach turn. I'll be there by 8. Miss you. That was from Michael, sent the day before, Tuesday, March 22nd, the day before my birthday. The response came 2 minutes later. The kids are so excited. Daddy's coming home. Followed by a heart emoji. Daddy's coming home. The kids. I read it again. And again. Trying to make it mean something. Anything other than what it obviously meant. I scrolled through more messages. Can't wait to see all my girls. That was Michael, sent 2 weeks earlier. We love you so much. Counting down the days until you're back. That was the other number. I hate lying to her. But what choice do I have? Michael again. I know, baby. I hate it too, but we'll figure it out. We always do. I thought I was going to be sick. I ran to the bathroom and knelt in front of the toilet, but nothing came up. I just knelt there, shaking, my mind trying to process what I'd just read. My girls, the kids, Daddy. These weren't messages to a colleague. These weren't messages to a friend. These were messages to someone who had children. Children who called him Daddy, which meant either he was having an affair with a woman who had kids from another relationship, or, and this thought was so horrifying I could barely let myself think it, these were his children. Children I didn't know existed. When Michael came home Friday afternoon, I was waiting for him. I'd barely slept in 2 days. I'd called in sick to work, something I almost never did. I sat him down and I showed him the messages. I'd printed them out. Pages and pages of them. I put them on the table in front of him and I asked him to explain. I watched his face. He looked at the papers. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up at me, and his expression was so sincere, so earnest, that for a second I almost believed what he was about to say. He told me I was misunderstanding. He said those messages were about his colleague Steve's family. Steve, who I'd heard about before, but never actually met. Steve, who apparently had daughters who called Michael Uncle David, because Michael had mentored Steve when he first started at the company years ago, and they'd become like family. He said Steve's wife had been sending those messages because they were planning a surprise party for Steve, and Michael was helping coordinate it, and the messages about the kids being excited were about the party. It sounded insane. It sounded like the kind of lie a child would tell. But Michael didn't waver. He pulled out his phone and he showed me a photo. It was him, with a man I assumed was Steve, and a woman, and 2 little girls, all of them standing together at what looked like a company event. See, he said, that's Steve and his family. That's who the messages are about. I stared at that photo. The girls were maybe 5 and 8 years old. They were blonde, they were smiling, and I wanted so badly to believe him. So I asked him why the messages sounded so intimate. Why did Steve's wife call him baby? Michael said I was reading too much into it. He said Steve's wife was from Colombia, and English wasn't her first language, and sometimes her word choices were a little off. He said she was a warm, affectionate person, and she used terms of endearment with everyone. It was a cultural thing. And then he turned it back on me. He asked me why I was spying on him, why I was reading his text messages. He said he was hurt that I didn't trust him. He said he'd been working himself to death to provide for our family, and this was how I repaid him, by accusing him of God knows what, based on some messages I'd taken completely out of context. And once again, I found myself apologizing. Once again, I was the one in the wrong for being suspicious. Once again, I let it go. But that night, lying in bed next to him, listening to him breathe, I knew something was deeply wrong. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. Over the next several months, from spring into summer of 2021, I started paying closer attention. Not in an obvious way. I didn't want Michael to know I was watching. But I was. I noticed that his trips to Atlanta and the surrounding areas had become even more frequent. He was gone at least 3 nights a week, sometimes 4. Monday through Wednesday, Sunday through Thursday. I started keeping track in a small notebook I hid in my nightstand. May 3rd through May 6th, Atlanta. May 10th through May 13th, Atlanta and Greenville. May 17th through May 20th, Atlanta. The pattern was undeniable. I noticed that he was on his phone constantly now. Even when he was home, even when we were sitting at dinner, he'd have his phone face down on the table next to him. And every few minutes, it would buzz and he'd glance at it. He started taking his phone with him everywhere. To the bathroom, to the garage when he took out the trash, even into the backyard when he mowed the lawn. When I asked him about it, he said he was waiting for important client calls, that his boss was putting pressure on him to close some big deals. I noticed he smelled different sometimes when he came home from trips. Not like perfume, nothing that obvious. But his clothes smelled like a different laundry detergent. Tide, maybe, when we used Gain. Or sometimes like fabric softener, when I never used fabric softener because it irritated my skin, and he knew that. I noticed he'd started working out obsessively. He joined a gym and went every morning at 5:30 before work. He bought protein powder and started drinking these shakes for breakfast. He lost 15 pounds. At 53 years old, he had the body of a man 10 years younger. When I commented on it, asked him what had inspired this sudden fitness kick, he said he'd had a physical and his doctor had warned him his cholesterol was too high and he needed to get in shape, or he was headed for a heart attack like his father. It made sense. It was reasonable. But there was something about the way he said it that felt rehearsed. I noticed he'd started buying new clothes. Nicer clothes. Button-down shirts from Nordstrom instead of his usual department store brands. Better jeans. New shoes. He said he needed to look more professional for client meetings, that his boss had suggested the senior managers needed to project a more polished image. Again, it made sense. But it was another change. Another small thing that didn't quite add up. I noticed that money seemed tighter than it should be. Michael made a good salary, over $120,000 a year, plus commissions that usually added another $30,000 or $40,000. We should have been comfortable. We should have been saving. But when I looked at our bank accounts, there never seemed to be as much as there should be. When I asked Michael about it, he said the company had changed their commission structure and he was making less in bonuses than he used to. He said he'd ask for a raise soon. By August of 2021, I knew in my gut that something was terribly, terribly wrong. I didn't have proof, I didn't have evidence, but I had 24 years of knowing this man, of being married to him, of sleeping next to him, and I knew he was lying to me. I could feel it. The question was, what was he lying about? Was it an affair? Was it financial problems? Was it something else entirely? Something I couldn't even imagine? I lay awake at night running through scenarios in my head, each one worse than the last. I thought about confronting him again, demanding the truth. But I knew how that would go. He'd have an explanation. He'd make me feel crazy for suspecting him. He'd turn it around and make me the villain. So instead, I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth myself. I didn't know how yet. I didn't have a plan. But I knew I couldn't keep living like this, in this state of constant suspicion and doubt, never knowing if what my husband told me was real or just another carefully constructed lie. I was going to find out what Michael was hiding, and I was going to do it in a way that he'd never see coming. That decision, that moment when I chose to stop being passive and start being active in uncovering the truth, that was the moment everything changed. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my sister Jennifer, not my best friend Rachel, who I'd known since nursing school, not my mother who called me every Sunday, and definitely not Hannah or Ethan, because part of me was still hoping I was wrong, that I was being a paranoid, suspicious wife who was seeing things that weren't there. That 24 years of marriage, of building a life together, of raising children together, meant something. That the man I'd loved since I was 24 wasn't capable of the kind of deception I was starting to suspect. So I watched. I listened. I documented everything. I started keeping a journal. A small spiral notebook that I hid in the back of my closet behind a box of old nursing textbooks. Every time something seemed off, every time Michael said or did something that didn't add up, I wrote it down. September 7th, 2021. Michael said he was in Greenville for meetings, called him at 8 in the evening. Background noise sounded residential, not like a hotel. Heard children laughing. He said the TV was on. September 14th. Michael came home from Atlanta trip. His clothes smelled like Downy fabric softener. We used Tide and no softener. Asked him about it. He said the hotel must have used it on the towels and the smell transferred. September 21st. Checked the hidden credit card statement that came in the mail. Charge for flowers from a florist in Atlanta. $143. Didn't receive any flowers. Asked him about it. He said it was for a client's wife who'd had surgery. I started paying attention to patterns in his travel schedule. I pulled up the calendar on my phone and I went back through the past year, marking every trip he'd taken, every night he'd been away from home. The pattern was undeniable. Atlanta. He went to Atlanta constantly, at least twice a month, sometimes 3 times, usually for 3 or 4 days at a time. Always Sunday night through Wednesday, or Monday through Thursday. The same schedule, over and over. When I asked him why he had to go to Atlanta so often, he said that's where the regional office was, that's where the major hospital systems were, that's where most of his important clients were located. It made sense on the surface. But when I really thought about it, when I added up all the days he'd spent in Atlanta over the past year, it came out to almost 140 days. That was more than a third of the year. Could his job really require him to be in one city for that much time? I started looking at our finances more carefully, going through every bank statement, every credit card bill. I opened a separate email account that Michael didn't know about, and I started having copies of all our financial statements sent there so I could review them without him knowing. What I found confused me even more. Our joint checking account, the one where his paychecks were deposited and where I paid all our bills, had less money in it than it should. Michael's salary was deposited by direct deposit twice a month, but when I added up what should have been there versus what was actually there was a gap. Money was disappearing, not huge amounts, but consistent amounts. $500 here, $700 there, $1,000 somewhere else. When I added it up over 6 months, almost $18,000 was missing. One night in late September 2021, I couldn't sleep. It was maybe 2 in the morning. Michael was home, asleep next to me, snoring softly. I lay there, listening to him breathe. This man I'd shared a bed with for 24 years, and I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. I got up carefully, trying not to wake him, and went downstairs to the living room. I opened my laptop, and I did something I'd never done before. I created a fake Facebook profile. I used a random photo I found online of a middle-aged woman, gave her a fake name, Sarah Mitchell, listed her hometown as somewhere in California, added a few generic interests. It took me maybe 10 minutes to set up. Then I searched for Michael's name, Michael David Walsh, Charlotte, North Carolina. His real profile came up immediately. The one I knew about. His profile picture was a professional headshot from a few years ago. His cover photo was a picture of our family from Hannah's high school graduation. He didn't post much, mostly just shared articles about healthcare and sales techniques. He had 237 friends, most of whom I recognized. Colleagues, family members, people from church, neighbors, my friends, his friends from college. Everything looked completely normal. But then I saw a suggestion at the bottom of the screen. Did you mean Michael Walsh in Atlanta? I stared at that suggestion. My heart started pounding. I clicked on it, and there he was, my husband, with a completely different Facebook profile. The profile picture was definitely him, but it was a photo I'd never seen before. He was wearing a blue polo shirt I didn't recognize, standing in front of a brick house I'd never been to, smiling at the camera with an ease and happiness I hadn't seen on his face in years. His cover photo was a sunset over what looked like a lake. His listed city was Atlanta, Georgia. His relationship status said, in a relationship. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I clicked on his profile, my hands shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. This profile was much more active than his Charlotte one. He posted regularly. Photos of food at restaurants, check-ins at parks and playgrounds in Atlanta, shared memes and funny videos. And photos. So many photos I'd never seen. Him at a pumpkin patch with 2 little girls, maybe 4 and 6 years old, both of them holding pumpkins and grinning at the camera. Him at a backyard barbecue with people I didn't recognize, standing around a grill with a beer in his hand. Him at a playground pushing a little girl on a swing. The photos went back years. I scrolled and scrolled, going back in time through his alternate life. Photos from 2020, from 2019, from 2018. Some of them dated back to 2016. 5 years. He'd been maintaining this secret Facebook profile for at least 5 years. And then I found the photo that made my world collapse. It was dated April 2021. 5 months ago, the photo showed Michael with his arm around a woman. She was beautiful, probably in her mid-30s, with long, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, olive skin, a bright white smile. She was wearing a yellow sundress. They were standing in front of a fountain, some kind of park or public space. And the way he was looking at her, the way his arm was wrapped around her waist, the way she was leaning into him, there was no mistaking what this was. The caption said, "Family Day at the Zoo, my heart is full," with a red heart emoji. The post had 37 likes and 12 comments. I read through them, each one like a knife in my chest. The woman, whose name according to her tag was Sophia Ruiz, had commented, "Love you so much, babe." Michael had replied, "Love you more, beautiful." A woman named Carmen had commented, "You guys are the cutest couple ever," with heart eye emojis. A man named Jorge had commented, "Hermano, you're a lucky man, beautiful family, beautiful family." I scrolled through Sophia's profile with trembling hands. It was public, not private, so I could see everything, and what I saw destroyed me. Sophia Ruiz, 36 years old, from Medellin, Colombia, living in Atlanta, Georgia, worked as a dental hygienist, and photo after photo of her with Michael, and with 2 little girls, the same 2 girls from the pumpkin patch photo, from the playground photo. In some of the photos, the girls called him Papi in the comments. Daddy. These children called my husband Daddy. I found photos of birthday parties. The older girl's 6th birthday in 2020, with Michael standing behind her as she blew out candles on a princess cake. The younger girl's 4th birthday in 2021, with Michael holding her on his lap while she opened presents. I found photos of Christmas morning 2020. The 2 girls in matching pajamas, sitting in front of a Christmas tree, with Michael and Sophia on the couch behind them, both holding coffee mugs and smiling. I found photos of what looked like an engagement party or some kind of celebration, with Sophia wearing a white dress and Michael in a suit, surrounded by people toasting them with champagne glasses. The date on that photo was June 2019. 2 years ago, while he was married to me, while he was living in our house in Charlotte, while he was sleeping in our bed, I found photos of the girls' school events. First day of kindergarten for the older one, preschool graduation for the younger one. Michael was in the photos, standing there like any other father, proud and smiling. I found a photo from just 3 weeks ago. Michael and Sophia and the 2 girls at a beach, all of them in swimsuits, the girls building sandcastles while Michael and Sophia sat on a blanket behind them. Sophia's caption said, "Best weekend ever with my loves. My loves." I ran to the bathroom and vomited. I barely made it to the toilet before everything came up. The wine I'd had with dinner, the sandwich I'd eaten for lunch, everything until there was nothing left and I was just dry heaving, my body trying to expel the poison of what I'd just learned, but unable to get it all out because it was everywhere, in every cell, in every memory, contaminating everything I thought I knew about my life. I sat on the bathroom floor until dawn, my back against the wall, my whole body shaking. 24 years, 2 children, a house, a life, memories, thousands of them. Our wedding day, the births of our babies, family vacations, quiet Sunday mornings, arguments and makeups, sickness and health, for better or worse, all of it real to me. All of it apparently meaningless to him. Because he had another one, another life, another family, another love. 2 little girls who called him Papi, a woman who called him Babe and posted about their perfect weekends together. And he'd been living both lives simultaneously for years, going back and forth between us like he was 2 different people. Michael Walsh of Charlotte, married to Rebecca, father to Hannah and Ethan. And Michael Walsh of Atlanta, partner to Sophia, father to those 2 little girls whose names I didn't even know. When the sun came up, I was still sitting on that bathroom floor. I could hear Michael moving around upstairs, getting ready for work. I heard him call my name, asking if I was okay. I told him I wasn't feeling well, that I thought I had a stomach bug, that he should go on to work without me. He left. I heard the front door close, heard his car start in the driveway, heard him drive away. And then I got up, washed my face, brushed my teeth, and went back to my laptop. I needed more than a Facebook profile. I needed real proof, undeniable evidence, because what I'd found was devastating, but it wasn't enough. Michael could claim the profile was fake, that someone was impersonating him, that the photos were doctored. He was good at explanations. He'd been explaining away my suspicions for over a year. If I was going to confront him, if I was going to blow up our entire existence, I needed to be absolutely certain. I needed evidence that couldn't be disputed. So I made a decision. I was going to hire a private investigator, someone who could follow him, photograph him, document his other life in a way that left no room for doubt or denial. I'd never done anything like this before. I didn't even know where to start. So I did what anyone does these days. I Googled it. Private investigator Charlotte NC. Dozens of results came up. I started going through them one by one, reading reviews, looking at websites. I needed someone who specialized in infidelity cases, someone discreet, someone who could get me answers. By noon, I'd narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. By 2 in the afternoon, I'd made my choice, a firm called Piedmont Investigations. The website said they specialized in marital infidelity, asset searches, and surveillance. The lead investigator was a woman named Patricia Hernandez, former police detective with 15 years of experience. I picked up my phone and I called the number on the website. A woman answered on the second ring. I took a deep breath and I said the words I never thought I'd say. I think my husband is living a double life. I need help proving it. Patricia Hernandez met me at a coffee shop in Rock Hill, South Carolina, about 30 miles south of Charlotte. Far enough away that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. Far enough that Michael would never accidentally see me there. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early October 2021. I'd taken a personal day from the hospital, told them I had a doctor's appointment. Patricia was in her late 40s, with short, dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore black pants and a blazer, professional but not flashy. She ordered a black coffee and sat down across from me in a corner booth. I'd brought everything with me, printed screenshots of the Facebook profile, copies of the credit card statements showing the charges in Atlanta, the text messages I'd photographed from our phone account, my notebook with all the dates and observations I'd been tracking. I spread it all out on the table between us, and I waited for her reaction. She looked through everything methodically, taking her time, occasionally making notes on a small pad. When she finished, she looked up at me and said something I'll never forget. She said, "Mrs. Walsh, in my experience, when a spouse has gone to these lengths to create a separate identity, a separate social media presence, hidden financial accounts, it's never just an affair. It's a second life. And usually, it's been going on much longer than you think." I asked her how common this was. Men with whole double lives, secret families. She didn't sugarcoat it. She said she'd worked maybe 24 cases like this in her 15 years as a private investigator, and before that, another dozen or so when she was a detective with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. She said it was more common than people wanted to believe. Men who traveled for work, men in sales, consulting, trucking, any job that required them to be away from home regularly. They had the perfect cover, the opportunity, and apparently, some of them used it to build entire alternate existences. She asked me what I wanted from her investigation. Did I want proof of infidelity for divorce proceedings? Did I want to know the full extent of his other life? Did I want her to approach the other woman? I told her I wanted to know everything, every detail. I wanted photographs, documentation, a timeline. I wanted to know who this woman was, who those children were, how long it had been going on, where the money was coming from. I wanted the complete picture before I made any decisions about what to do next. Patricia nodded and told me her rate, $150 an hour plus expenses. She estimated it would take about 40 to 60 hours of surveillance and investigation to get me the comprehensive report I was asking for. That meant somewhere between $6,000 and $9,000. I didn't hesitate. I told her to do it. I paid her retainer that day, $3,000 in cash that I'd been secretly withdrawing from our joint account over the past month. $200 at a time from different ATMs so Michael wouldn't notice a pattern. Money he didn't know I'd saved. Money I'd hidden in an envelope in the back of my closet. Patricia asked me when Michael's next Atlanta trip was scheduled. I told her he was leaving that Sunday, October 10th, for what he said would be a 4-day trip. She said that was perfect. She'd follow him from the moment he left Charlotte until the moment he came back. She'd document everything. Where he went, who he saw, where he stayed. She told me not to change anything in my routine, not to act suspicious, not to confront him or give him any indication that I knew anything. "Just act normal," she said. "Let him think everything is fine, and in about a week, I'd have the answers I needed." We shook hands, and I drove back to Charlotte, my heart pounding the entire way. Part of me felt guilty, like I was betraying my husband by having him followed. But a bigger part of me, the part that had looked at those Facebook photos, that had read those text messages, that part knew I was just trying to uncover a betrayal that had already happened. I wasn't the one breaking our marriage vows. I was just the one finally finding out that he'd broken them years ago. The next 6 days were the longest of my life. Michael left that Sunday evening, October 10th, kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, threw his overnight bag in his car and drove away. I watched him from the living room window, wondering if Patricia was already following him, wondering where he was really going, who he was really going to see. I went to work Monday through Thursday like normal, delivered babies, checked on postpartum mothers, smiled and made small talk with colleagues, all while my phone sat in my pocket like a weight, waiting for updates from Patricia. She told me she'd check in periodically but not to expect constant communication. Surveillance required patience and focus. She'd contact me when she had something significant. The first message came Monday evening at 7:30. A text to the new phone number I'd gotten specifically for this. A prepaid cell that Michael didn't know about. The message said, "Subject arrived at residential address in Brookhaven area of Atlanta, 2847 Wilmington Drive. Woman and 2 children present. Will continue surveillance." That was it. Short and professional. But it confirmed what I already knew in my heart. He wasn't at a hotel. He was at a home. With her, with them. Tuesday, another message. Subject took children to Montessori school at 8 a.m. Returned to residence. Left again at 10 a.m. with woman. Went to Target. Grocery shopping. Appears to be established domestic routine. Grocery shopping. Like a normal couple. Like a normal family. Wednesday's message was longer. Subject attended parent-teacher conference at Montessori school, 3 p.m. Spoke with teachers about both children's progress. Appeared comfortable and familiar with staff. Multiple photos obtained. Thursday morning, Patricia called me. I was on my lunch break, sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot. She said she had enough. More than enough. She asked if I could meet her that evening to review everything. Michael wasn't scheduled to come home until Friday afternoon, so I said yes. We met at the same coffee shop in Rock Hill at 6 o'clock. Patricia brought a laptop and a large envelope full of printed photographs. She opened the laptop first and showed me a slideshow of surveillance photos. 47 of them, just like she'd promised. Michael pulling into the driveway of a beautiful 2-story brick house with a manicured lawn and a swing set in the backyard. Michael getting out of his car and being greeted at the door by Sophia, who wrapped her arms around him and kissed him. Not a friendly peck, a real kiss. The kind of kiss you give someone when they come home. Michael kneeling down as 2 little girls, maybe 4 and 6 years old, ran out of the house in their pajamas and jumped into his arms. Their faces were lit up with pure joy. Daddy's home. Michael the next morning, backing out of the driveway in a silver Honda Pilot that I'd never seen before, with both girls in car seats in the back. Michael walking those girls into a Montessori school, holding both their hands, bending down to kiss them goodbye at the classroom door. Michael at Target with Sophia, pushing a shopping cart full of groceries, paper towels, children's snacks. Him reaching across the cart to hold her hand while they waited in the checkout line. Michael mowing the lawn of that brick house on Wednesday afternoon, shirtless in the October heat, while the 2 girls played in a plastic kiddie pool in the backyard, and Sophia sat on the porch reading a book. Michael that same evening at the parent-teacher conference, sitting in a tiny chair in a kindergarten classroom next to Sophia, both of them listening intently while a teacher showed them artwork the older girl had made. Michael leaving the house Thursday morning in a suit and tie, kissing Sophia goodbye at the door, getting into his car, and driving to what Patricia confirmed was the actual Atlanta regional office of Piedmont Medical Supply. So he did have real work in Atlanta. But that wasn't why he was there. The work was just convenient. An excuse. A cover story that happened to be partially true, which made it easier to maintain the lie. Patricia showed me more photos. Michael and Sophia and the girls at a playground over the weekend before I'd hired her. Michael pushing the littler one on a swing while the older one went down a slide. All of them laughing. Michael at a restaurant with Sophia, just the 2 of them, sitting across from each other at a romantic table for 2, holding hands. The metadata on the photo showed it was from Tuesday night. The same Tuesday night he'd texted me, saying he was exhausted from meetings and was going to bed early. He wasn't in bed. He was at a nice Italian restaurant with her. Patricia closed the laptop and opened the envelope. Inside was her full written report. 12 pages, single-spaced, documenting everything she'd observed and everything she'd been able to verify through public records and online searches. I read through it with shaking hands. Subject: Michael David Walsh maintains a residence at 2847 Wilmington Drive, Atlanta, Georgia. Property records show the home was purchased in 2016 for $435,000. Deed lists Michael David Walsh and Sofia Mariana Ruiz as joint owners. They own the house together. They bought it 5 years ago. While he was married to me, Sofia Mariana Ruiz, age 36, born in Medellin, Colombia, immigrated to the United States in 2007 on a student visa, obtained permanent residency in 2012, currently employed as a dental hygienist at Buckhead Dental Associates. No prior marriages, 2 children, both born in Atlanta. Subject maintains relationship with Sofia Ruiz and resides at the Wilmington Drive address approximately 3 to 4 days per week. Relationship appears to be stable and established, consistent with long-term domestic partnership. Both children refer to subject as father. Subject is actively involved in children's daily routines, school activities, and care. Then came the part that made me feel like I'd been punched in the stomach. Birth records obtained for both children through Fulton County Vital Statistics. Child 1, Valentina Sophia Walsh, born March 2015. Father listed on birth certificate, Michael David Walsh. Child 2, Isabella Marie Walsh, born August 2017. Father listed on birth certificate, Michael David Walsh. They were his daughters, not Sophia's children from another relationship. His daughters, his biological children, born in 2015 and 2017. While he was married to me, while we were living together in Charlotte. While he was tucking Hannah and Ethan into bed at night and helping them with their homework and attending their school events, he'd had 2 more children. 2 little girls who carried his last name, Valentina and Isabella, ages 6 and 4. I had 2 stepdaughters I'd never met. Hannah and Ethan had 2 half-sisters they didn't know existed. Patricia's report continued with financial information she'd been able to gather from public records. The mortgage on the Atlanta house was $2,800 a month, paid from a joint checking account at SunTrust Bank in Michael and Sophia's names. Utilities, property taxes, all paid from the same account. She'd found records of Michael's car registration in Georgia. That Honda Pilot was registered in his name at the Atlanta address. He had a Georgia driver's license in addition to his North Carolina one. He existed, legally and officially, in both states. He filed taxes in both states. He had doctor's appointments in both cities. He had a gym membership in Atlanta and one in Charlotte. Patricia estimated, based on the financial evidence she could find and the lifestyle she'd observed, that maintaining the Atlanta household was costing Michael at least $6,000 a month. Maybe more. That explained where all our money was going. That explained why our accounts never had as much as they should. He was supporting 2 families, 2 mortgages, 2 sets of children, 2 lives. The report concluded with Patricia's professional assessment. Based on surveillance, documentary evidence, and witness interviews with neighbors at the Atlanta residence, subject has been maintaining this dual family arrangement for approximately 6 years, possibly longer. Both households appear to be unaware of each other's existence. Subject has successfully compartmentalized his life, spending approximately 50% of his time in each location. This level of deception requires extensive planning, financial resources, and psychological capability to maintain separate identities and relationships simultaneously. In my professional opinion, subject is unlikely to voluntarily end either relationship and will continue this arrangement as long as possible unless confronted with evidence. I sat there in that coffee shop booth, staring at those words until they blurred. 6 years, maybe longer. Hannah had been 15 when this started. Ethan had been 12. Our children had been in middle school and high school, needing their father, and he'd been in Atlanta, building a whole new family. Creating 2 little girls who called him Daddy, buying a house with another woman, playing happy families while I sat at home wondering why he seemed so distant, why we didn't have enough money, why he was always tired. 6 years of lies, 6 years of living a double life so complete, so meticulously constructed that neither family knew the other existed. I looked at Patricia and I asked her the question I'd been afraid to ask. How was I going to confront him? How was I going to get the truth? And that's when she said something that changed everything. She said I shouldn't confront him yet, not until I had a lawyer, not until I'd protected myself financially, not until I had a plan. Because men who were capable of this level of deception, she said, were also capable of anything when cornered. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I went to work every day like normal, showed up for my shifts at the hospital, delivered 3 babies that first week, checked on new mothers, filled out charts, attended staff meetings, smiled when people asked how I was doing, came home and made dinner, chicken and rice one night, spaghetti the next. Michael would come home from work and ask about my day, and I'd tell him it was fine, busy, the usual. He'd tell me about his meetings, his clients, his sales numbers. He'd complain about his boss putting pressure on him to meet quarterly targets. He'd talk about needing to go to Atlanta again next week for a big presentation. And I'd sit there across the dinner table from him, nodding and listening, acting interested, while inside I was screaming. Because I knew where he was really going when he said, Atlanta. I knew who was waiting for him there. I knew about Valentina and Isabella. I knew about the house on Wilmington Drive. I knew about the 6 years of lies. But I couldn't say anything yet. I couldn't confront him. Because Patricia had been right. I needed a plan first. I needed to protect myself financially. I needed to understand the full legal implications. I needed to make sure that when I finally confronted him, I had all the power and he had none. So I played the role of the oblivious wife. I kissed him goodbye in the mornings. I asked him if he wanted me to pick anything up from the grocery store. I did his laundry, folding the shirts he'd wear in Atlanta, the shirts he'd wear to play happy family with his other daughters. At night, I'd lie in bed next to him, listening to him breathe, and I'd think about Sophia lying next to him in that other bed in that other house. I wondered if she knew, if she suspected, or if she was just as blind as I'd been for all those years. I wondered what he told her about where he went when he left Atlanta. Did he tell her he had work in Charlotte? Did she know he had another family? Or did she think she was the only one, just like I'd thought I was the only one? I started copying financial documents when Michael was asleep or out of the house. Bank statements going back 3 years, credit card statements, tax returns, investment account statements, our mortgage papers, his employment contract, insurance policies. Everything I could find, I made copies of. I took them to work and kept them in a locked drawer in my locker. Evidence he couldn't destroy if he found out I knew. I started withdrawing cash, not large amounts that would trigger alerts, just $200 here, $300 there, from different ATMs around Charlotte. I told Michael I needed cash for a charity fundraiser at the hospital, for groceries, for getting my hair done. Small lies to cover the bigger truth I was preparing to reveal. Within 2 weeks, I'd saved $4,000 in cash that he didn't know about. I opened a new bank account at a completely different bank, one we'd never used. Put the account in my maiden name, Rebecca Patterson. Started having my paychecks from the hospital deposited there instead of our joint account. When Michael asked why my paycheck seemed smaller, I told him the hospital had changed our health insurance and the premiums were higher now. He accepted that without question. Why wouldn't he? I'd never lied to him before. I'd never had reason to. I was the trustworthy one in this marriage. I was the one who'd been faithful, loyal, honest. But now, I was learning to be strategic, to plan, to protect myself from the man I'd trusted with everything. And the whole time, I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. How was he financing 2 households on his salary? How was he keeping track of all the lies? Who else knew about his double life? Did his co-workers know? His boss? His friends? Was I the only fool who'd been kept in the dark? I found the lawyer through a recommendation from a nurse I worked with whose sister had gone through a difficult divorce. His name was Robert Chen. His practice was in Rock Hill, South Carolina, the same town where I'd met with Patricia. Far enough from Charlotte that I wouldn't risk running into anyone Michael and I knew. I called his office from my new prepaid phone and made an appointment for a Friday afternoon when Michael was scheduled to be in Atlanta. I told the hospital I had a dentist appointment. Robert Chen was in his early 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was modest but professional. Diplomas on the wall from UNC Chapel Hill and Duke Law School, photos of his wife and 3 grown children on his desk. He offered me tea, and we sat in comfortable chairs across from each other, and I told him everything. I showed him Patricia's investigative report, the surveillance photos, the birth certificates she'd obtained showing Michael listed as father to Valentina and Isabella, the property records showing he co-owned a house in Atlanta with Sophia, the credit card statements showing thousands of dollars in charges I'd never authorized or known about. I showed him copies of our joint bank statements with the mysterious withdrawals I'd been tracking. Robert read through everything carefully, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When he finished, he looked up at me and asked a simple question. What did I want? I told him I wanted a divorce. I wanted full documentation of Michael's infidelity and financial deception to use in court. I wanted to protect whatever assets we had left before Michael could hide or spend them. I wanted to make sure I got my fair share of everything we'd built together over 24 years, and I wanted him to pay for what he'd done. Not just emotionally, but financially and legally. Robert nodded and explained that North Carolina was an equitable distribution state, which meant marital assets would be divided fairly, but not necessarily equally. Michael's infidelity could impact the distribution, especially if I could prove he'd been spending marital assets on his affair and his other family. The fact that he'd purchased a house with Sophia using money that should have been marital property, the fact that he'd been supporting 2 children from an extramarital relationship, all of that would work strongly in my favor. But Robert warned me about something important. If I confronted Michael before we'd secured our assets, before we'd filed the necessary legal paperwork, he could drain our bank accounts. He could max out credit cards. He could transfer money to hidden accounts I didn't know about. He could sell assets. He could make it very difficult for me to get what I was entitled to. Men who were capable of maintaining double lives for years, Robert said, were also capable of sophisticated financial deception when they felt threatened. So we came up with a strategy. First, I needed to gather every piece of financial documentation I could find. Bank statements, retirement accounts, investment statements, property deeds, car titles, insurance policies, everything. Robert would review it all and determine the full extent of our marital assets. Second, I needed to establish my own financial independence, my own bank account, my own credit card, my own emergency fund. That way, if Michael cut me off financially when I confronted him, I wouldn't be helpless. Third, we'd prepare all the divorce paperwork in advance. That way, the moment I was ready to confront him, we could file immediately. We'd include a motion for temporary restraining orders, preventing him from disposing of assets or accessing our joint accounts. We'd move fast, before he had time to react or hide anything. Robert asked me when I wanted to do this, when I wanted to confront Michael and file for divorce. I told him I needed a little more time. I needed to be absolutely ready, emotionally and practically. I needed to tell Hannah and Ethan first. I needed to prepare myself for the explosion that was coming. But soon, I said. Very soon. I couldn't keep living this lie much longer. Robert said he'd start preparing the paperwork, and I should come back in 2 weeks with whatever additional financial documents I could gather. I thanked him and left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness exactly, but purpose, direction, control. It was mid-October 2021 when the opportunity presented itself. Michael told me he had a major sales conference in Atlanta the second week of November. 4 days, Monday the 8th through Thursday the 11th. It was a required event for all regional managers in the Southeast. He'd be staying at the Marriott Marquis downtown where the conference was being held. He showed me the email invitation from his company, the conference agenda, the hotel confirmation. All of it looked completely legitimate. And maybe it was. Maybe there really was a conference. But I knew Michael wouldn't be staying at that hotel. I knew where he'd really be sleeping. Around the same time, I got a text from my sister Jennifer, who lived in Asheville, North Carolina. She was asking if I wanted to come visit for a long weekend. She said she missed me, that we never got to spend time together anymore, that she'd love to have some sister time. Just us, no husbands, no kids. Shopping, wine, good food, catching up, the timing was perfect. Almost too perfect. Jennifer's proposed weekend was the exact same weekend as Michael's Atlanta conference. It was like the universe was handing me an opportunity. I could tell Michael I was going to Asheville for a girls' weekend with Jennifer. He'd be relieved to have me out of the way, so he could spend his time in Atlanta with Sophia and the girls without having to check in with me constantly or worry about me calling at an inconvenient time. And while he thought I was safely in Asheville, I'd actually go to Atlanta. I'd see his other life with my own eyes. Not through a private investigator's photos, not through Facebook posts. I'd witness it firsthand. I called Jennifer back and told her I'd love to come visit that weekend. She was thrilled. Started planning all the things we'd do together. I felt guilty lying to her, but I couldn't tell her the truth yet. Couldn't tell anyone. When I told Michael about the Asheville trip, his reaction was exactly what I expected. He seemed pleased, almost relieved. He said that sounded great, that I deserved a break, that I'd been working so hard at the hospital and I should take some time for myself. He said the timing was perfect since he'd be at his conference anyway. We'd both be busy with our own things. I smiled and agreed, said it would be good for both of us to have a little independence. He even encouraged me to extend the trip if I wanted. Stay through the weekend, he said. Really relax and enjoy myself. Of course he wanted me to stay longer. The longer I was gone, the more time he could spend with them without having to maintain the charade with me. I told him maybe I would. I'd see how it went. Then I called Jennifer back and told her something had come up at work, a scheduling conflict, and I actually couldn't make it that weekend after all. Could we reschedule for next month? She was disappointed but understanding. We made plans for December instead. Another lie, but necessary. I booked a hotel room in Atlanta for November 8th through 11th. Not anywhere near the Marriott Marquis where Michael's supposed conference was, and not near the house on Wilmington Drive either. I found a Hampton Inn in Decatur, about 20 minutes from Brookhaven. Far enough away that I wouldn't accidentally run into Michael, but close enough that I could drive to that house, to his other life, whenever I wanted. November 8th, 2021. A Monday morning, the day everything would change. Michael and I both packed our bags the night before. His was sitting by the front door, ready for his early flight to Atlanta. Mine was in the trunk of my car, ready for my drive to Asheville. Except I wouldn't be going to Asheville. We woke up at 5:30 that morning. Michael needed to leave by 6 to make his 7:45 flight. I made him coffee, scrambled eggs and toast for breakfast. We sat at the kitchen table together, like we had thousands of times before. He talked about the conference schedule, the presentations he had to attend, the networking events in the evenings. I told him about my plans with Jennifer, the restaurants we wanted to try, the shopping we'd do. Both of us lying to each other over breakfast, both of us pretending. But only one of us knew we were both pretending. At 6 o'clock, Michael kissed me goodbye, told me to have a great time with my sister, said he'd text me when he landed in Atlanta, told me he loved me. I said I loved him too. One more lie. Or maybe not a lie. Maybe I did still love him, or loved the man I'd thought he was. I wasn't sure anymore. I watched from the living room window as he backed out of the driveway and drove away. Then I went upstairs and took a long shower, put on jeans and a sweater, grabbed my overnight bag, and I left. I drove west toward Asheville like I'd said I would, just in case Michael had any way of tracking my car or my phone. I wasn't sure if he did, but I wasn't taking chances. I drove for an hour and a half, until I was well into the mountains, far enough that if he checked he'd see I was headed in the right direction. Then I pulled off at a rest stop near Old Fort, sat in my car for 30 minutes, drinking gas station, coffee, waiting. At 9:30, I checked the flight tracker on my phone. Michael's flight had landed in Atlanta 20 minutes earlier. He was there now, probably getting his rental car, probably texting Sophia to let her know he'd arrived. I pulled out of the rest stop and got back on the highway. But instead of continuing west toward Asheville, I turned around, headed back east toward Charlotte, then south, toward Atlanta. The drive took 4 hours. I stopped once for gas and a bathroom break. Didn't eat anything, because my stomach was in knots. Just kept driving, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing with what I was about to do. I arrived in Atlanta around 2 in the afternoon, checked into the Hampton Inn in Decatur using my maiden name and paying with cash. The clerk didn't ask any questions, handed me my room key and told me breakfast was served from 6 to 9. I went to my room, a generic hotel room that could have been anywhere in America. Beige walls, floral bedspread, landscape painting that meant nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the folder Patricia had given me. The address, 2847 Wilmington Drive. Photos of the house so I'd recognize it, photos of Sophia so I'd recognize her. Photos of Valentina and Isabella, my husband's other daughters. I had the whole afternoon and evening ahead of me. Michael thought I was in Asheville with Jennifer. Sophia thought he was at a conference at the Marriott. Nobody knew I was here. Nobody knew what I was planning. Tomorrow morning, I'd drive to that house. I'd park down the street, and I'd watch my husband's other life unfold in front of me. I'd see it with my own eyes, and then I'd decide what to do next. Tuesday morning, November 9th. I woke up at 5:30, couldn't sleep anyway. My stomach was churning. I got dressed in the dark hotel room, put on jeans and a black jacket and a baseball cap I'd brought specifically to make myself less recognizable. Grabbed the prepaid phone and my regular phone, the folder with the address and photos, from my car keys. I was out the door by 6:15, driving through Atlanta rush hour traffic toward Brookhaven. I'd plugged the address into my GPS the night before. 2847 Wilmington Drive. 23 minutes from the hotel. I arrived at 6:40 and parked 3 houses down on the opposite side of the street, under a large oak tree that provided some cover. The neighborhood was beautiful, upper middle class, well-maintained homes with manicured lawns, SUVs and minivans in driveways, basketball hoops, children's bikes left on front porches, the kind of neighborhood where families lived. The house itself was exactly like Patricia's photos. 2-story brick colonial, black shutters, white front door, a porch with 2 rocking chairs, a swing set visible in the backyard, flower beds along the front of the house, recently mulched, a silver Honda Pilot in the driveway, the same one from the surveillance photos. Everything looked peaceful, normal, like a home where a family lived their regular, ordinary life. Except nothing about this was ordinary. I sat in my car watching that house as the sun came up, waiting. At 7:15, the front door opened, and there he was. Michael, my Michael, wearing jeans and a Carolina Panthers sweatshirt I'd bought him last Christmas. He was holding the hand of a little girl, maybe 4 years old, with dark, curly hair and olive skin. Isabella, the younger daughter. She was wearing pink leggings and a purple jacket and light-up sneakers. Behind them came Sophia, looking exactly like her Facebook photos. Long, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, jeans, a green sweater. She was holding the hand of the older girl, Valentina, who had the same dark, curly hair as her sister, but was taller, lankier, maybe 6 years old. She wore jeans and a red hoodie and carried a small backpack with a unicorn on it. They walked to the Honda Pilot together. Michael opened the back door and helped Isabella climb into her car seat, buckling her in carefully, saying something that made her laugh. I could see her little face light up. Then he ruffled Valentina's hair as she climbed into her booster seat and buckled herself. Sophia got into the driver's seat. Michael got into the passenger seat. And they backed out of the driveway and drove past me, so close I could have reached out and touched their car. A perfect little family heading out to start their day. I waited until they turned the corner. Then I started my car and followed them. They drove to a Montessori school about 10 minutes away, a cheerful building painted yellow with a playground full of colorful equipment. The parking lot was filling up with other parents doing school drop-off. I parked at the far end of the lot and watched. Michael got out and opened the back door, helped Isabella out of her car seat, took Valentina's hand. Sophia walked around from the driver's side and the 4 of them walked toward the school entrance together. I watched Michael kneel down in front of both girls, right there by the front door. He said something to them, and they both giggled. He hugged Isabella, then Valentina, kissed them both on the forehead, stood up and put his arm around Sophia's waist, kissed her. Not a quick peck on the cheek. A real kiss. A kiss that said, "I love you. I'll see you later. Have a good day." Right there in front of all the other parents dropping off their children. Nobody looked twice. Nobody thought it was strange or wrong, because to them, Michael was just another dad, just another husband. This was his family. This was his life. After the girls went inside, Michael and Sophia walked back to the car holding hands. They stood by the driver's side door talking for a minute, and then Michael kissed her again before getting into the passenger seat. They drove away together, and I sat in my car in that parking lot, crying so hard I couldn't see. My hands were shaking. My chest felt like something heavy was sitting on it, crushing me, making it impossible to breathe. Those little girls, Valentina and Isabella, they loved him. You could see it in their faces, in the way they'd run to him when he knelt down, in the way they'd hugged him goodbye. He was their daddy. He took them to school. He buckled them into their car seats. He made them laugh. He was present in their lives in a way he'd stopped being present in Hannah and Ethan's lives years ago. When was the last time Michael had taken Hannah or Ethan to school? When was the last time he'd been home for a normal weekday morning routine? I couldn't even remember. He was always traveling, always gone, because he was here, with them, living this other life where he was an involved, attentive father to these 2 little girls, while his actual children, his first children, the ones he'd raised from birth, barely saw him anymore. I sat there crying until my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw. Then I drove back to Wilmington Drive. The house was empty. Michael and Sophia had driven away together after dropping the girls at school. I didn't know where they'd gone, but I knew I had a window of time. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. I did something I never thought I'd be capable of. I got out of my car and I walked up to that house. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I walked up the front porch steps and I looked in the window next to the door. The living room, beige couch, navy armchair, coffee table with children's books stacked on it, a bookshelf full of framed photos. I could see them even from outside. I moved to the next window, the one looking into the dining room. There was a family calendar hanging on the wall next to the refrigerator, the kind with a grid for each day of the month. I could just barely make out the writing. Valentina, soccer practice, 4 p.m. Isabella, dentist, 2 p.m. Date night Friday with a heart drawn next to it. The same kind of calendar I kept in our kitchen in Charlotte. The same kind of normal family organizational tool. Except this family wasn't normal. This family was built on lies. I moved around to the side of the house where there were larger windows looking into what appeared to be a family room. And what I saw there made me feel like I'd been stabbed. Photos. Everywhere. Professional family portraits on the wall. Michael and Sophia and the girls at a beach, all of them in white shirts and khaki pants, the kind of matching outfits families wear for professional photos. The girls were younger in that photo, maybe 3 and 1, which meant it had been taken 3 years ago, when Michael and I were still married, when he was still coming home to Charlotte every week, when I still trusted him completely. Another photo showed them at Christmas, everyone in matching red pajamas, sitting in front of a Christmas tree. Another showed them at what looked like a zoo, the girls pointing at elephants, Michael and Sophia standing behind them with their arms around each other. There were school photos of the girls, birthday party photos. And then, on the mantel above the fireplace, I saw something that made me actually gasp out loud. A wedding photo. Michael in a black tuxedo. Sophia in a white dress, not a traditional wedding gown, but a knee-length white lace dress. Elegant and beautiful. The 2 girls standing in front of them wearing matching white flower girl dresses. They were standing under an arch covered in flowers, outside somewhere that looked like a garden. Michael was looking at Sophia with an expression of complete adoration, and she was looking at him the same way. This wasn't a legal wedding. It couldn't be. Michael was still legally married to me, but they'd had some kind of ceremony, some kind of commitment celebration, with their daughters as flower girls, while he was married to me. I walked back around to the front of the house, my whole body trembling with rage and grief and shock. I'd seen enough through the windows, more than enough. But then I looked at the mailbox by the street, and I did something I knew was illegal. I opened it. There were several pieces of mail inside. I pulled them out and looked through them. A Georgia Power bill addressed to Michael Walsh and Sophia Ruiz. $287 for the previous month's electricity. A water and sewer bill from the city of Atlanta. $93. A mortgage statement from Wells Fargo. I opened that one with shaking hands. Mortgage payment due December 1st. $2,847. The account was in both their names, Michael David Walsh and Sophia Mariana Ruiz. They had a mortgage together, a 30-year mortgage on this house that they'd bought in 2016, according to Patricia's report. 5 years ago, he was paying this mortgage every month, $2,847, while also paying our mortgage in Charlotte, which was $1,963 a month. That was over $4,700 a month just in mortgages, plus utilities for both houses, plus food, insurance, car payments, everything else it took to maintain 2 complete households. How was he affording this? His salary was good, but it wasn't that good. There had to be money I didn't know about. And then I found it. An envelope from SunTrust Bank, quarterly statement for a joint savings account. I opened it. Account holders, Michael David Walsh and Sophia Mariana Ruiz. Current balance as of September 30th, 2021. $133,412. $133,000. In a savings account I'd never known existed. Money that should have been ours. Money that should have been in our joint accounts, in our retirement funds, in college savings for Hannah and Ethan. But instead, it was here. In Atlanta, in an account with her name on it. I thought about all the times I'd worried about money. All the times I'd clipped coupons and looked for sales and put off buying things I needed because I thought we had to be careful with our finances. All the times Michael had told me we couldn't afford a vacation or a home improvement project because money was tight. And the whole time, he had over $130,000 in a secret account with his other family. He'd been siphoning money from our marriage for years, taking what should have been ours and building a nest egg with her. I pulled out my phone and I took photos of everything. Every piece of mail, every bill. The mortgage statement, the bank statement, everything. Evidence that couldn't be denied. Evidence that showed the full extent of his deception. Not just the affair, not just the other family, but the financial betrayal. The theft, really, because that's what it was. He'd stolen from me, from us, from our children. Then, I put all the mail back in the mailbox, exactly how I'd found it, and I walked back to my car. I sat there for another 20 minutes, waiting, watching. At 9:30, the Honda Pilot pulled back into the driveway. Michael and Sophia got out. He had his arm around her shoulders. They were both carrying Starbucks cups, laughing about something. They walked into that house together, and I started my car and drove away, but I wasn't done, not even close. Because tonight, I was going to do something I knew would change everything forever. Tonight, I was going to knock on that door. I spent the rest of that day driving around Atlanta in a daze. I couldn't go back to the hotel. Couldn't sit still. I drove through neighborhoods I didn't know, past parks and shopping centers and office buildings, not really seeing any of it. My mind kept replaying what I'd seen that morning. Michael walking those little girls to school, the family photos on the walls, that wedding photo on the mantle, the bank statement showing $133,000. At some point, I stopped at a gas station and bought a bottle of water I couldn't drink and a granola bar I couldn't eat. I sat in the parking lot, staring at nothing, until it started getting dark. And then I made a decision. I was going back to that house. I was going to knock on that door. I was going to confront both of them, Michael and Sophia. And I was going to make them look me in the eye while I destroyed their perfect little fantasy world the same way they'd destroyed my life. It was 6:20 when I pulled back onto Wilmington Drive. The sun had set. Porch lights were on up and down the street. The Honda Pilot was in the driveway. Lights were on inside the house. I could see movement through the windows. They were home. All of them. I parked across the street, not trying to hide anymore, turned off my car, sat there for a moment, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. And then I got out, walked across that perfectly manicured lawn, up those porch steps, and I knocked on the door. I heard voices inside, footsteps approaching. The door opened, and there she was, Sophia. Even more beautiful in person than in photos. Dark hair loose around her shoulders, wearing jeans and a cream-colored sweater and an apron with flowers on it. She looked at me with polite confusion, the way you look at a stranger who's knocked on your door. Maybe she thought I was selling something or asking for directions. She said, "Can I help you?" in slightly accented English. I could smell dinner cooking behind her, something with garlic and tomatoes, something that smelled delicious and homey and normal. I looked at her and I said, "Is Michael here?" Her expression shifted slightly, still polite but more guarded now. "Yes, but we're just sitting down to dinner. Can I ask what this is about?" And I said the words I'd been rehearsing in my head all afternoon. "I'm his wife." For a second, she didn't react, like she hadn't heard me or hadn't understood. Then her face went completely white. "His what?" she whispered. "I'm Rebecca Walsh, Michael's wife. We've been married for 24 years. We live in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have 2 children, Hannah and Ethan." That's when Michael appeared behind her. He must have heard my voice. He came to the door, and our eyes met, and I watched every emotion flash across his face in the span of about 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, shock, and then pure, absolute terror. His face went gray. He grabbed the doorframe like he needed it to hold himself up. He said, "My name. Just my name. Rebecca." Like a question and a statement and a plea all at once. I looked past him into the house. I could see the dining room table set for dinner. 4 places, the girls sitting there in their chairs, looking toward the door with curious expressions. Valentina said, "Daddy, who is it?" "Daddy." I turned back to Sophia, who was staring at Michael now, not me. "What is she talking about?" she asked him. Her voice was shaking. "Michael, what is she talking about? Who is this woman?" Michael opened his mouth, but nothing came out. So I answered for him. "I'm his wife," I said again, looking directly at Sophia. "We got married in June of 1997. We live at 4782 Meadowbrook Lane in Charlotte. We've been together for 26 years, and until 3 months ago, I had no idea you existed." Sophia started shaking her head. No, that's not possible. Michael's not married. He's never been married." I pulled out my phone. I'd prepared for this. I'd made sure I had everything I needed. I showed her our wedding photo. Me in my white dress, Michael in his tuxedo, both of us young and smiling and so stupidly happy. "June 14th, 1997, I said. I swiped to the next photo. Our family Christmas card from last year. Me, Michael, Hannah, and Ethan in front of our Christmas tree. "This is our daughter Hannah. She's 21. This is our son Ethan. He's 19. I swiped again. A photo of Michael and me at a restaurant for our anniversary last year. This was our 23rd anniversary dinner, June 2020, last year. Sophia was crying now. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but silent tears streaming down her face, her whole body trembling. She looked at Michael. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me she's lying. Tell me you're not married." Michael's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like he was going to be sick. The girls appeared in the doorway behind them. Valentina was holding Isabella's hand. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Valentina asked. "Who's that lady?" I looked at those 2 little girls. They looked so much like Sophia. Dark, curly hair, olive skin, big brown eyes. But they had Michael's nose, Michael's smile. They were his daughters, my husband's daughters with another woman, children conceived while he was married to me. I looked back at Sophia. How long have you been together? She was crying too hard to answer. So I asked Michael directly. How long? When did this start? He finally found his voice. Rebecca, please. Not here. Not in front of the girls. Please. I laughed. I couldn't help it. An awful, bitter sound. Not in front of the girls? Your daughters that I didn't know existed? These girls right here? I looked at Sophia again. How old are they? She whispered. Valentina is 6. Isabella just turned 4. 6 years old. Which meant Sophia got pregnant 6.5, 7 years ago. 2014, 2015. When Michael and I had been married for 17 years. When Hannah was 14 and Ethan was 12. When I'd thought our marriage was solid and stable and forever. Have you been living here with him? I asked Sophia. Is this your house? She nodded, still crying. We bought it together, 5 years ago. We've lived here since 2016. And you thought he was what? Single? Divorced? He told me he'd never been married, Sophia said. Her voice was barely audible. He said he'd been focused on his career, that he'd never found the right person until he met me. She looked at Michael with such betrayal in her eyes. You said I was your first real love. You said we were your family. You said you wanted to marry me. There's a wedding photo on your mantel, I said. I saw it through the window. When was that? Last June, Sophia whispered. We had a commitment ceremony. It wasn't legal. We didn't file paperwork, but we had a ceremony. With our families. With the girls. I felt like I'd been slapped. Last June. June 2021. We celebrated our 24th anniversary in June. You took me to that French restaurant in Charlotte. You gave me a bracelet. And then you came here and had a fake wedding with her? The little girls were crying now too, scared by all the yelling and their mother's tears, even if they didn't understand what was happening. Sophia picked up Isabella, held her close. Valentina wrapped her arms around her mother's leg. Michael just stood there looking between me and Sophia, like he couldn't figure out which disaster to address first. I pulled out my phone again, and I pulled up the photos I'd taken that morning. The mail, the bills. I saw your mortgage statement, I said to Sophia. $2,800 a month. And your son trust savings account, $133,000. Money he stole from our marriage. Money that should have been going to our retirement, our kids' college funds. He's been siphoning it off and hiding it here with you. Sophia's eyes went wide. She looked at Michael. Is that true? Is the money in our account her money? It's complicated, Michael started to say. It's not complicated at all. I cut him off. We have joint finances. We've had them for 24 years. Every dollar he earns is marital property. And he's been taking that money and spending it here. On this house. On you. On your children. While I worked full-time as a nurse and worried about why we never seemed to have enough money, while I clipped coupons and skipped vacations because I thought we needed to save, while I put off buying things I needed because I thought we were struggling financially, I looked at Michael and I felt nothing but contempt. How did you do it? How did you keep track of all the lies? Did you have a spreadsheet? Did you set reminders on your phone so you'd remember which life you were supposed to be living on which day? He didn't answer, just stood there looking at the floor. Answer me, I shouted. You owe me that much. After 24 years, after destroying everything, you owe me an explanation. How long were you planning to keep this going? Forever? Were you just going to keep living 2 lives until you died? Or were you planning to eventually choose one of us and abandon the other? Michael looked up at me and I saw tears in his eyes. I never meant for this to happen. It got out of control. I didn't know how to stop it. You didn't know how to stop lying? You didn't know how to stop betraying both of us? You're pathetic. I looked at Sophia. I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer already has all the paperwork ready, and I'll be pursuing every legal avenue to get back what he stole from me. The money in that savings account, half the value of this house, everything. I don't know what your legal status is, and honestly, I don't care. But you should know that the man you've built your life with, the father of your children, is a liar and a fraud. He's been lying to you for 6 years, just like he's been lying to me for 24. You can't trust anything he's ever told you. Then I looked at Michael one last time. Don't come back to Charlotte. Don't come to our house. Don't call me. My lawyer will contact you with divorce papers and instructions on how to proceed. I'm taking everything. The house, the retirement accounts, everything. You can stay here in your fake little fantasy life that you built on lies. I hope it was worth it. And then I walked away. Down those porch steps, across that lawn. To my car. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove away from that house, and I didn't look back. I drove to the Hampton Inn in Decatur, and I went to my room, and I collapsed on the bed, and I cried harder than I've ever cried in my entire life. Huge, racking sobs that shook my whole body, crying for the marriage I'd lost, for the 24 years I'd given to a man who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way, for the life I'd thought I had that turned out to be built entirely on lies. I cried until I had nothing left, until my eyes were swollen shut and my throat was raw and my chest ached. And then, sometime around midnight, the crying stopped, and I felt something I hadn't expected, something I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. I felt free. The terrible weight of not knowing, of suspecting but not being sure, of living in that constant state of doubt and anxiety, that weight was gone. I knew the truth now, all of it, and as devastating as it was, as much as it hurt, at least I knew. At least I could move forward. The lies were over, the deception was exposed, and I was free. I drove back to Charlotte the next morning, called Hannah and Ethan and told them I needed to see them immediately. Sat them both down in our living room and told them everything. Showed them the photos, the evidence. Watched their faces go through the same shock and betrayal I'd experienced. Hannah cried. Ethan punched a hole in the wall and then sat on the floor with his head in his hands. They were devastated, furious. They'd looked up to their father their entire lives, and in one conversation, I had to tell them he wasn't the man they thought he was, that he had 2 other daughters they'd never met, that he'd been living a double life for 6 years. The next day, I met with Robert Chen, and we filed for divorce. Michael tried calling me 63 times that first week. I didn't answer. He showed up at the house once, and I told him through the locked door that if he didn't leave, I'd call the police. He finally hired his own lawyer and tried to fight the divorce. Tried to claim that the Atlanta situation wasn't as bad as it looked, that he'd made mistakes but we could work through it, that our marriage was worth saving. His lawyer actually argued that I should be willing to forgive him because marriage is about commitment through difficult times. Robert shut that down fast with the evidence. The PI report showing 6 years of deception, the financial records showing he'd stolen over $130,000 from our marital assets, the photos of him with Sophia and the girls, the birth certificates listing him as father, the property deed showing he'd bought a house with another woman while married to me. It was overwhelming and undeniable. The divorce took 11 months from filing to finalization. North Carolina required a year of separation before granting a divorce, but we were able to expedite some aspects because of the infidelity and financial fraud. I got the house in Charlotte. I got 60% of his retirement accounts. I got alimony of $3,000 a month for 5 years. He had to pay back half of the money in that Atlanta savings account, which came to over $66,000. His wages were garnished to ensure payment. I also got to keep my own retirement accounts and savings completely separate. Robert made sure Michael couldn't touch anything that was solely in my name. During the divorce proceedings, I found out that Sophia had left him too. She'd kicked him out of the Atlanta house the same night I'd confronted them. She filed for child support for Valentina and Isabella. She was just as betrayed as I was. Maybe more so because at least I'd had years of marriage before the lies started. Her entire relationship with Michael had been built on deception from day one. Everything he'd told her about himself was a lie. Last I heard through my lawyer, Michael had moved to Tampa, Florida, alone, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, paying child support to Sophia for the Atlanta girls, paying alimony to me, working a different sales job because Piedmont Medical Supply had fired him when the scandal became public. His reputation was destroyed. Nobody wanted to work with a man who'd maintained that level of deception. How could you trust him in business if he'd lied to 2 families for years? Hannah and Ethan barely speak to him now. Hannah talks to him maybe once every few months, brief and cold. Ethan hasn't spoken to him at all in over a year. They feel betrayed, not just on my behalf, but on their own. They realize now that all those missed soccer games and school plays and family dinners, all those times their father said he had to travel for work, he was actually in Atlanta, playing daddy to his other daughters. Valentina and Isabella got the version of their father that Hannah and Ethan lost, and they can't forgive him for that. I'm 54 now. It's been 3 years since that night in Atlanta. 3 years since I knocked on that door and destroyed 2 families, or maybe revealed that Michael had already destroyed them, and we just didn't know it yet. I still work at Carolina's Medical Center, still in the maternity ward, still bringing babies into the world and finding joy in those first cries, those first moments when a mother holds her child. My work has been a lifeline through all of this. A reminder that there's still beauty and hope and new beginnings even when everything else is falling apart. Hannah got married last summer to a wonderful man named David, which is ironic and painful at the same time. I walked her down the aisle myself because she refused to have her father there. I'm a grandmother now. Baby Olivia was born in March. She's 7 months old, and she's the light of my life. I get to be the kind of grandparent I always imagined being, present and involved and trustworthy. Everything Michael wasn't. I sold the house in Charlotte. Too many memories, too much pain in those walls. I bought a small 2-bedroom condo in the Elizabeth neighborhood, close to downtown. It's just mine. Every piece of furniture I chose myself. Every paint color on the walls reflects my taste, not a compromise. No shared history, no lies, just mine. I've started dating again. Nothing serious yet. I went on a few dates last year that didn't go anywhere. I'm cautious now in ways I never was before. I question things. I pay attention to inconsistencies. I trust my gut when something feels off. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I needed to learn to protect myself better. I've also started volunteering with a women's support group for people going through divorce, especially women who've discovered infidelity. I share my story. I listen to theirs, and I'm shocked by how common this is. Not just affairs, but double lives, secret families, men and women who maintain completely separate existences in different cities. It happens more than anyone wants to believe. And it's never the betrayed spouse's fault. That's what I tell every woman who comes through that group. It's not because you weren't enough. It's not because you failed. It's because the person you trusted chose deception over honesty. And that choice says everything about them and nothing about you. If you're watching this and something feels off in your relationship, if your gut is telling you something isn't right, trust that feeling. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're not being a jealous, insecure spouse. Your intuition is picking up on real signals that something is wrong. Don't ignore it like I did for so long. Don't make excuses for behaviors that don't make sense. Don't let someone make you feel guilty for asking questions or wanting transparency. You deserve honesty. You deserve a partner who doesn't have a secret second phone or unexplained charges on credit cards or a whole other family you know nothing about. And if you do discover the worst, if you find out that the person you trusted has been lying to you, I promise you this. You will survive it. It won't feel like it at first. There will be days when you can't get out of bed, days when you can't stop crying, days when you feel like your entire reality has collapsed. But slowly, painfully, you'll start to rebuild. You'll remember who you were before them. You'll discover strengths you didn't know you had. And eventually, you'll realize that freedom, even painful freedom, is better than living in a beautiful lie. You're stronger than you know. Please leave a like if this story resonated with you. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories about real people navigating life's hardest moments. And in the comments, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had to start completely over? Have you ever discovered that someone you loved wasn't who you thought they were? Share your story. This is a community of survivors, and you are not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next one.